see you guys in the dark.
This past Saturday, my girlfriend and I went out to the bars in the city that we attend school in. We went to some bars that were downtown to meet up with her friends and wound up having a pretty shit night altogether. First, my girlfriend dropped her phone into the toilet. Then two of her friends got in a huge blow-up argument over some petty bullshit. At this point, my girlfriend was having absolutely no fun and decided we should go home. It was about 12:30 a.m. We walked outside to call an Uber to take us back to our apartment. Except we ran into an issue. My phone was dead, and hers might as well have been a brick, so no Uber for us. Despite this, she was adamant that we leave now and walk back to her place, as it would only take 30 minutes walking, and it wasn't that cold outside at night. I was against this, as this walk would lead us through some rough neighborhoods, and I really didn't want to deal with all that. She was having none of this, and started walking off on her own, leaving me no real choice but to follow her or let her walk alone. I chose to just follow her. Now might be a good time to bring up a major difference between me and my girlfriend. She was from a nice, safe, small town where nobody locked their doors, and she grew up in a stable, loving household. To her, crime and violence were essentially fiction. She was fortunate enough to never have learned any painful lessons in this regard. Unfortunately, I grew up in a very rough neighborhood with a mother who tried her best and a father who has spent more of my life in prison than out of it. I lived surrounded by crime and violence until I was 17 when my mom married my stepdad, who was a great guy that provided for us. While my girlfriend's naive with a huge blunder on her part, it makes sense considering her background, and I can't really begrudge her for it. Back to Saturday. We're about 20 minutes through our walk, and so far have only suffered minimal harassment. Basically just a few shouts thrown our way, but none of it overall threatening. Basically just stuff like cat calls at my girlfriend, and a few guys who seem genuinely concerned telling us to be careful out here. At this point, my girlfriend looks like she's on an episode of Scared Straight, and she's holding my arm and clutching her purse. It was around this time that I noticed a few things that sent a dangerous senses tingling. The first was directly to our front. A man was sitting against a wall, although he appeared to be sleeping pitifully. I kind of twitched and shaked a little bit. The other was across the street and ahead of us. It was a group of teenage boys. They weren't particularly well dressed for the weather, and they appeared to be from the area. The way we were all oriented, me and my girlfriend were going to have to pass by one of these potential threats. I chose the sleeping man. As we approached him, one of the boys called out something to the effect of, "Hey man, watch out!" At that same time, the sleeping man revealed that he was very much awake, and jumped up, pulled a knife out, and demanded my girlfriend's purse. She reached into her purse to get her cash out and to give it to him, which I think he perceived as her going for a weapon, maybe pepper spray or even a gun. He grabbed her hair in his left hand and shouted at her to get her hands out of there. Prior to this, I was just going to get us both out of this encounter unharmed. So I had been stayed stocked still, trying not to set him off, but when he grabbed her hair, I had to act quick. My memory of this part is weird. It's particularly incredibly vivid, but also bizarre and muddled. So these next few paragraphs might be weird because I'm just writing everything as I remember. I had been on the left side of my girlfriend, and he was in the front of her facing her. I grabbed his right hand, which had a knife in it, with my left hand so he couldn't stab her. Then I threw a low punch with my right that hit him in the ribs and on the right side. I think this is what made him let go of my girlfriend, because he took his left hand and pushed it into my face, while at the same time I felt him both trying to wrench his knife hand free of my grip and also push it towards me. I thought I heard him shout that he was going to end me, but this may be something that my adrenaline brain made up because this is all happening incredibly fast. Fighting like this is a completely unreal experience. There's really no way to describe the feeling of being so close to someone who's trying to stab you. And it was at this point that the gravity of the situation had set in. This wouldn't be like the fights I'd been in before, which were relatively admissible. This was real, and if I didn't act quickly and violently, I might get hurt. This is the long version of the thoughts that went through my head, the more complete thoughts that my brain formed later to make sense of the chaos. In reality, my thoughts on the moment were probably closer to fuck him up. My right hand was free at this point, so I threw a punch at what I hoped was his throat. I couldn't see still because his left hand was in my face. I must have hit it because I heard a choking sound and he faltered a bit. I don't know exactly how it happened, but next thing I knew, I had both of my hands on his right wrist and we were positioned almost back to back with his elbow on my hip. I quickly twisted, trying to throw him face first into the ground, but he must have been falling backwards into me, so instead of his elbow bent the wrong way, and I heard a pretty grisly snap. He screamed and fell holding his elbow. At the same time, the teenagers had run across the street and reached us. They basically kicked the guy a few times while sort of shoving us in the direction we were headed. We ran, and the kids ran with us, shouting obscenities at the mugger. Agree running a few blocks, I slowed down and thanks the kids, who I could now tell were only like 14 to 17 years old. They basically called me a fucking idiot for bringing my girlfriend through here wearing decent clothing and told us to just get the fuck out of there. We obliged and went straight to the police station, which is fortunately a few blocks away from my girlfriend's apartment. I filed a report, and the officer confirmed that I was a fucking idiot for bringing my girlfriend through that area. I didn't mention it was her idea because she was really shaken up by the whole thing. She cried nonstop at the station while I described the events and the guy to the officer, who said they'd look into it, with a tone that said, "We're absolutely not going to look into this." I guess robbery and attempted murder is too small of a fish for Officer Mustache. In the end, we were in bed by 3:30 a.m., exhausted and shaken up ultimately and hurt. Also, I really hope that I never meet that mugger again, but the teens were all right. I guess I should have crossed to their side of the street instead of the sleeping man. Growing up, every summer in July, my family would get together and camp out for 2 weeks at White Lake State Park. Some of my best childhood memories were made there. Rollerblading, Nerf gun wars, flashlight tag, and water balloon fights with my cousin and neighboring kids in the campground. When I was around my late teen years, my family stopped gathering together to camp out after my grandmother passed away. One of the last years I was there, this was one particular memory that has stuck with me. A little over 10 years ago, I was 16 years old. It was around 10 p.m. at night when I noticed I had a missed call on my cheapy little track phone. My family was sitting around the campfire cooking s'mores and sharing some laughs, so I decided to go off and get some privacy to return the call. I took a long, narrow trail that winds in between other campsites that at the end leads up to the bathroom. I wasn't going to the bathroom, I just wanted to find an empty campsite and sit at a picnic table and make my call. There was plenty of those, since this whole side of the campground where I was headed was vacant. There was no other campers nearby in that area. It was quiet and dark, so I chose a campsite. I sat down at the table. The lights from the distant bathroom from up to the top of the hill behind me were all illuminating my surroundings just a little bit. I called my friend and was carrying on a conversation for around 20 minutes. As I'm sitting there, staring straight ahead, I see a silhouette coming down the road in front of me. The figure is coming towards my direction, where all these empty campsites are. I could see that it was a person. It's not that unusual to see people strolling through the campground for a night walk. The people I see usually have flashlights, though. This person did not. I wasn't creeped out at this point. No really reason to be. I just watched curiously. As the person got closer, I could see a better outline, and that it was a man I was looking at. I also noticed his pace slowed down. I kept my eyes fixated on him as I continued conversating on my cell phone. A minute or two passed, and now he stopped moving. He's just standing there in the road looking straight into the campsite where I'm at. I don't know if he knew I could see him. He was staring straight at me, and I was staring right back at him. He was a little heavy-set and tall. I could also make out that he was wearing a light jacket. I couldn't see much for facial features, but I would guess I was staring at a man in his 30s or 40s. Alarm bells were going off in my head now. My mind had turned to mush at this point, and I'm frozen solid. I was no longer listening to what my friend was saying on the phone. I was in a stare-off with this guy. Then he started to move again. He was tiptoeing towards me, very carefully, like he didn't want to make any noise. He put one foot in front of the other, leaned forward in a slight hunch form. It looked like he was about to charge me. In that moment, I snapped out of my mind-frozen state and leaped off the picnic table and started running through the campsite back towards the trail. I could hear him trampling behind me, leaves scuffling, heavy yet fast footsteps. Footsteps were getting louder and closer. I made it back to that narrow trail. Once he got close to where I was, I heard the sound of twigs snapping and an oof noise come from the man, which I can imagine maybe he tripped, or almost tripped, or maybe got face slapped by a tree branch. Most likely, he wasn't familiar with the trail like I was. Whatever the reason was, it caused him to stop chasing me. I didn't stop to look back. I just kept running and running until I made it back to my family's campsite. When I got back, they were still sharing laughs and smile by the campfire. I broke down crying, and I was trembling. I explained what had just happened to me. My aunt spoke up and said, "Oh, geez, he probably thought he knew you and was coming to give you a good scare as a joke." She just dismissed me. My cousin chimed in and said, "Yeah, he probably stopped running after he realized that he didn't actually know you. He probably feels dumb now." They all chuckle about it and change the subject. I think I was dismissed because no one wanted the good vibes of the night to be ruined, and the fact that I'm just a socially awkward person in general. I'm very cautious and shy. For that time being, I just let them convince me that I was just overreacting and overthinking. But here I am years later, looking back and shaking my head over all of this. I wish I was taken seriously, but other than that one thing happening, it was still a great trip. It was time well spent with my family. My experience makes me think twice about going for a walk by myself anywhere. I carry pepper spray and a mini keychain alarm on me now. So, Mr. Campground Chaser, let's not meet again. I'm an avid cosplayer, and in 2015, my friends Ari and Morgan and I went for a second year in a row to Phoenix Comic-Con. I was cosplaying Stevani from Steven Universe, and Ari was cosplaying Black Rose Shooter. Morgan decided not to cosplay, since this was her first time at the con. We were all underage and couldn't drive, so we took the transit home at the end of each day. We left the con around 9 o'clock that night and hopped on the transit. It was surprisingly empty, a lot emptier than usual. We found our seats when the doors opened. Morgan and I sat down, but Ari's back was having problems, and she decided that standing was best. Everything was all right up to the second stop. It was a quiet ride, and we laughed a bit at some of the events of the day, but nothing more than small talk. As we were all exhausted from walking around quite literally all day. At the next stop, a slightly older man got on and sat next to where Ari was standing. He had longer blonde hair and was clean-shaven. He wore a suit jacket and t-shirt with slacks. He didn't look at all like the typical homeless Phoenix writer. "You girls coming back from the convention?" he asked. I nodded. Ari looked slightly uncomfortable, as she didn't do very well with initiating conversation with people she didn't know, especially in the outfit she was wearing. "I like your costumes." We all smiled and thanked him nervously. We weren't strangers to the kind of people that hung around the Phoenix Transit, and how gross and irritating they could be. But this guy not only looked well off, but he also spoke very clearly. But he still threw me off quite a bit. I didn't like the grin he had sprawled across his face as he complimented our cosplays. It was at this point that Morgan put in her headphones and was luckily zoned out for the whole ordeal. Morgan was one of my friend's little sisters who wanted to go to the con. My friend wasn't able to go, so their parents let us watch her while she was there. She was a freshman, so not too much younger than us, but young enough to need supervision. I felt very protective of her for some reason, and this guy was giving me bad vibes. The man was quiet until the next stop. "Do you girls mind if I pray over you?" Ari managed. Before we could actually give an answer, he grabbed Ari's arm and my hand, closed his eyes. We both looked at each other with panic in our eyes, frozen with absolute terror. We didn't want to pull away for fear of making sudden movements, and besides that, his grip was so firm it felt like he was going to try and break my fingers. "Dear Heavenly Father," he began, "I pray you look over these angels of light and give them many blessings in life." At first, Ari and I sort of relaxed, thinking he was just a preacher from a nearby church trying to do us an act of random kindness. But then things took a horrifying turn. "I pray you subdue their souls to your servant, Father, so that I may enjoy them as you intended." "What?" He ended the prayer with an amen and finally let us go. Ari desperately wanted to pull on her jacket to cover herself, but she couldn't move. "What can we do?" I thought. "We have to get off right now." "God is telling me some amazing things about you girls," he almost chuckled. "Pardon me?" I asked him. He proceeded to put his hand on my leg and Ari's arm. "He's telling me he sent you here for me. I knew you would come." Neither of us could say anything. His voice was a terrifying, hissing whisper as we were visibly scared. "God is telling me it's time to have my way with you, to solidify the end of the reptilian reign. This man is no preacher. He was a psychopath. We had to get off as soon as possible, and next stop was about a minute and a half away. I knew there was a strip mall there, and we could get off and head into one of the stores. One of them had to be open." His grip on my leg tightened as the next stop pulled into view, so hard that it left a bruise the next day, and I don't easily bruise. "Come on, my light angels. Get off with me." The train stopped. "Actually," I said, "this is our stop." I stood up and jerked my leg away. He obviously wasn't prepared for that, because his hand slipped right off. "Thanks for the prayer." I poked Morgan to attention and told her to come on, hoping that she wouldn't say anything about this not actually being our stop. To my relief, she followed without any question. We walked briskly off the train and jogged to the strip mall where we found a Subway. They let us stay there while we called Ari's parents and explained what happened. As soon as we got off the phone, Ari and I burst into tears as we told Morgan what had happened. I'm still terrified of riding the transit, and I try my best to get home from the convention any other way. There was no telling what would have happened if we rode the train any further than we did, and I don't like to think about the possible outcomes. I really love Craigslist. I'd estimate that I've met maybe 300 people from buying or selling stuff, and for the most part, everyone was nice and harmless. However, I did run into 2 creeps who made me rethink meeting strangers alone to sell stuff. FYI, I was in my early 20s at the time. The first guy, it's 2009, and I'm staying with my parents for the Christmas holiday in a small town in Florida. I'm going through my childhood room and cleaning out the closet and find a giant CD holder full of maybe 100 really shitty CDs. It's the 21st century. No one uses CDs anymore. I figured I'd try to sell the CDs on Craigslist. I put up a listing. 100 CDs from the late 90s and early mid-2000s. Mix of pop and rock, all for $35 or best offer. The next day I get an email from a guy named John around 2 p.m. He says that he's in town temporarily and that he wants the CDs. He says he can pick them up after dinner around 8. I email him back my address and number and tell him to text or call when he's on his way. 8 p.m. comes around. I figure I've been stood up, which happens often on Craigslist. No big deal. My dad works for a liquor distribution company and would often do demonstration nights at restaurants and bars and would come home at bar closing time. This night, he gets home at around 3 a.m. I'm in college and a total night owl, so I'm still up probably eating junk food, surfing the web, watching horror flicks. I hear a car pull up. I look out the window and see him sitting in his car eating food. He often stops at Taco Bell on his way home and eats it in his car so my mom doesn't know he's cheating on his diet. Maybe 10 minutes later, my dad comes in and shouts my name. "There is someone here to see you. Can you please tell me why a stranger is showing up at my house at 3 a.m.? Huh? I run downstairs and my dad says some guy pulled up in the driveway and asked for me by name. I walk outside with my dad, and this guy is with maybe mid-30s gets out of his car. He says he's the Craigslist guy who wanted to buy my CDs. My dad goes back in the house. I tell the guy it's really, really late to just be stopping by, especially without texting first. However, since I'm awake, I go and grab the CDs. He then proceeds to drone on and on about why he's buying the CDs. He says he's engaged to a woman he loves very much, and all he wants to do is make her happy. He said that last week, someone broke into her car and stole all of her CDs. She was really upset and wanted to make it up to her. He looked on Craigslist and found my listing and was really excited because I had a bunch of CDs she used to have. Weird thing is, I didn't list any of the artists or bands because I was lazy, but I didn't think about that at the time. Anyway, he said he was getting it for her as a Christmas gift. He said he was staying with his future in-laws somewhere nearby and their family barbecue ran really late, which is why he never made it at 8 p.m. At this point, I've lost interest and say something along the lines of, "That's sweet. Next time, you should probably call or text the Craigslist instead of just showing up." I hand him the CDs, he hands me the cash, and I go back inside. 3 days later, I start getting texts from an unknown number. "Hey, I don't know my way around this town. Care to tour guide? I could really use a massage. Where can I get a massage in this town? You're Asian, do you massage? Would you take $40 for an hour? Happy ending?" Me. "Who the hell is this?" "Oh, I'm sorry. I bought the CDs from you the other day. Do you squirt?" I didn't respond, obviously. I show my friends that night and we laugh it off. Then the next day I get more texts. "I still have your address. I'm at the Bank of America near your neighborhood. I just got the 40, babe. Only 3 minutes away. Are you home? You fucking cunt. Stop ignoring me. I'm almost there." I immediately run downstairs to tell my dad and mom. It was nighttime, so we shut off all the lights outside and inside the house. My mom, little brother, and I went in my parents' room in the back of the house. My dad hid behind the curtains of the front bay window with a shovel in his hand. A few minutes later, I heard him run down the front hallway, fling the front door open, and run outside. We heard some faint shouting, so we all walked out of the bedroom. By that time, my dad came back in with his shovel, his face red and his hair disheveled. Apparently, the guy came driving down our street really slow. My dad recognized the car and went running outside with the shovel, yelling obscenities at the guy. The guy peeled off and never came back or texted me again. The second guy. I was moving from Florida to D.C., and I was going to load up my car as much as I could with stuff. However, I lived on the 3rd floor, plus a bit of a walk from my assigned parking spot, so I figured I could use some help. I posted an ad on Craigslist. I said I was looking for someone to help me load some heavy stuff, like TVs, desks, etc. in my car, less than an hour's worth of work, and I'd pay $45. I'd give the very first responder my number and address. He shows up. He was probably about 5'8", 350 pounds of pure fat. The sweat and smell coming off this guy in the Florida heat was pretty nauseating, but I didn't care as long as he did their job right. While he was carting heavy stuff, I was loading lighter things. Whenever I'd go upstairs to grab another load, he'd hurry up after me so he could walk to the stairs behind me. I had the door propped open so he didn't have to worry about me needing to unlock the door for him or anything. When he'd follow me upstairs, he made these weird grunting noises like, mm-hmm, but I assumed it was because he was out of shape. Eventually everything's loaded properly, save for some sweat smears on my stuff. I pay him and he drives off. I go back in my place to finish loading and cleaning. I go about 45 minutes later to put another load in my car, and I see his truck is back, parked across the street from mine. He's sitting in the driver's seat, looking at me. When he sees me notice him, he looks away. I walk over to his window and knock. He rolls it down and asks if I need help or if it was lost, and I ask if he needs help or if he was lost. I was really confused as to why he had come back, and I knew he didn't live near here. He didn't say anything, just rolled his window back up and drove off. Okay, whatever. Of course, 5 minutes later, my phone starts blowing up. I don't recognize the number, so I don't answer the calls. Then texts start rolling in. Him, I bet you taste salty and sweet. Me, who is this? Him, your pussy. Him, what are you up to tonight? I can come back over. I get the sinking feeling it's the Craigslist guy. He had never called me about the job when I gave him my number, so I didn't know what his number was. Him, I like your pink panties. Then I realized he was looking at my dress when I was walking up the stairs. I immediately feel like a total idiot for wearing a dress that day. He then started dialing my number over and over again. I didn't know how to block numbers through Sprint, so I had to just turn my phone off. Later, I was with my guy friend grabbing a bite and turned my phone back on. I got another text from the guy about how he wanted to toss me around like a rag doll and tie me up and make me beg for it. I show the text to my friend and tell him the story. The Craigslist creep then proceeds to start blowing up my phone again. So my friend answers and says he is going to cut his dick off and feed it to his dog if he ever contacts me again. I moved the next day, so I never had to worry about him randomly showing up in his truck again. Since then, I've bought and sold stuff on Craigslist, but I always make sure people meet me at a public place. I also stalk people's email addresses, Google Plus accounts, and etc. I'm a 20-year-old female. I started working in a call center last year. It was a team of around 40 people, so we didn't exactly know each other well. There was this one guy, I'll call him Craig, who was about 35 years old, who I would always sense was watching me. He had a perfect view of me at my desk from his, and his gaze would follow me whenever I walked anywhere. I never paid much attention to it because I didn't know him at all. One day, I turned up to work and was called over by a couple of girls I was friends with. I knew something was up because of the way they were acting. They explained Greg had messaged one of them asking for my number, saying how keen he was on me. I was immediately uncomfortable. There was quite an age gap between us, and he always gave me a weird vibe. I felt weird, but sort of brushed it off and laughed with my friends. I didn't let him get my number, though. That day, we found out Craig had lost his shit at the office after the rest of the staff had left the day before. He was abusing management and throwing things around the office. He ended up being fired and banned from the building. Later on that night, I received a message request on Facebook. It was Craig. The message said how attractive he thought I was, how he could never stop staring at my butt, the fantasies always had about me, etc. Basically just really disgusting stuff to hear off someone you never even had a conversation with, and who was significantly older than you. So that's when it started. For the next 5 months, I got messages every single day. Management and security at work were all informed of what was going on, as we had concerns he would turn up to the office to see me. I was in constant worry that he would try to find me, as his messages became extremely explicit of what he wanted to do to me. I had thoughts of just blocking him, but my friends made the point that something like that could aggravate him. I just put up with the messages and calls until one day it stopped, and I still don't know why it did. So, creepy stalker guy from work, let's not meet again. So my driving restrictions recently came off, and me and a friend, we'll call him Austin, just decided to go for a drive. I'm staying in his house for the night because we decided to have a few drinks. We hang out, a few hours pass by, and we decide to go for a walk at around 3:30 a.m. After about half an hour, we walk back. To help understand why we're so freaked out, I'll explain the layout of the roads we were walking on. We live in a small town on the far east of Canada, so night walks have never really been a problem. No dangerous people in small towns, right? Anyways, this is a one-way street, so you can only drive this street in the opposite direction of where we walked back to. It's connected to another one-way road on the side, covered by buildings and trees, and connected by small, alley-sized roads. You wouldn't really think to take these roads unless you needed to get back to the top of the road we were on. This is probably hard to understand at this point, so I'll just move on. As we're walking home, I'm standing against a wall, taking a Pokestop on Pokemon Go. A black SUV starts coming down the road and begins to slow down as it nears us. Oh, lovely, just what I wanted. The car comes to a stop. The person inside stares at us for a few seconds before rolling down his window. This is already too sketchy for my liking, and I'm very on edge. It's dark, and his features are covered in shadow due to the angle of the streetlights shining on the back of his head. From what I could see, however, he was very skinny, with rough, slightly wrinkled skin, and a bit of a tan, and black hair. He didn't look to be from around here. "What are you at?" is all that he said in a slight whisper, which is Newfie slang. I replied with a slightly agitated, "Nothing." He just said nothing in response, and kind of peeled out, driving down the road. My friend and I are big dudes, both about 6 foot and 200 pounds. Regardless, we didn't like the interaction and walked back towards his house. On the way back, I told Austin I had a bad feeling and to follow me. We ran up a small hill with some trees on it, behind some cover, and of course, not 30 seconds later, the same SUV comes around the corner back into the street. This dude took one of the connection roads to get back around to us. The SUV wrapped around into a Tim Hortons parking lot, not even 20 feet from where we were standing, circled around, went out of the lot, up the road, into another parking lot, did same thing, and then went up to the same road we had to walk up. Why? We cut through the woods and got home, because there was absolutely no freaking way we were walking up the road he just went up. This raised questions in my head, though. What were his intentions? Were there people in the back of his car? Did he drive down the road more to see if there was anybody for us to call out for help? If it hadn't been for both of us there, would we have been jumped? Or worse? I don't know. But did he snap us out of our buzz? Creepy SUV dude, you best not hope we meet again, because I'm sleeping with scissors tonight. So I met this guy online recently that seemed sweet and kind. I decided to set up a date on Friday, and everything is going very well. That is, until yesterday. I get a message telling me that he wants to hang out tomorrow morning, and I agree, thinking that we'd just go out for Starbucks, and he'd come around the time we agreed. I go to sleep with a smile on my face. Instead, I wake up to a phone call around 8 a.m. Surprised, I answer it, and it's my date. "Hey, are you up yet?" "I just woke up." "I don't care how you look. Also, your mom freaked me out." "My mom?" "Yeah, she saw me parked across your house. She waved, and I waved back. She was kind of creepy." "What time did you say you were coming over here?" 5:30 a.m. My heart sinks. I had no idea that someone was actually meeting me for coffee would show up super early to my house and wait for me to wake up. After the phone call, I check my messages. I see messages from 5 in the morning. A picture of my house with the message, "Do you live here?" The next message, he says, "Someone spotted me, so I moved," along with a picture of a neighbor's house nearby. Obviously, I was freaked out myself, and knew that my mother and neighbors were probably equally as freaked out. I started panicking and texting my friends on my phone, desperate to see if anyone was awake and could help at all. I get one reply on a group chat, but out of fear of judgment, I lie to her, saying I got the situation handled. I convince myself to go out and confront this guy. "Hi, princess. How are you?" I noticed him on my neighbor's yard, probably trying to look for me in their windows. Shaking, I try to fake a smile and let him hug me. He then goes in for a kiss, wet, messy, and with tongue. I felt frozen on what to do. I try to tell him that coming at 5 a.m. to wait for me isn't a cool thing to do, but he gives the excuse that he wanted to beat traffic and not drive sleepy, as he works at night. I try to see things from his perspective and shake it off. I go off into his car, and he and I try to have something close on a regular date, which casually doesn't include groping, licking my neck multiple times, and talking about marriage right away so I could have his baby. I managed to convince him to drop me off away from my home and let me walk back to my house. That is, until I realized he was following me in his car, and when I asked about it, he asked if I wanted him to walk me to my house. Even more scared, I tell him no and manage to escape. By the time I arrive home, I'm in tears and extremely shaky. I tell him that I don't think we're compatible and to never come near me or my family ever again. In response, he tells me that I'm shit. From that, I think I'm going to take a break from online dating, period. Quick backstory. I work at a gas station on a main route. We see a lot of travelers passing through. Only one person works each shift, and it's a 24-hour store. We are short-staffed, so I agree to an overnight. I'm female. I work in a state that's always had self-serve gas stations. So this guy comes in. I asked him if he needed any help. He says no. He's getting gas at the pump, but needs to use the bathroom. I go back to work on whatever invoices we got yesterday. The guy uses the bathroom, and then goes back outside. About 5 to 7 minutes later, he comes back inside and tells me that he's confused about the pump. He directly says, "You might have to come outside to help me." Customers don't often say this. They usually just complain that it's not working, so I'm already feeling weird about this guy. I shake it off because he looks like a nerd, and I don't feel afraid of him really. I look at the register to see what error it came up with for his pump, and there's no errors. The register doesn't even say it was on use. Even if someone tries to pay and nothing's wrong with their payment, it will at least say payment/loyalty timed out. But literally, it had no signs of him trying to use it before asking me for help. I ask him if he wants to just pay inside. He agrees to, gets his wallet out of his car, and then pays $10. I give him his receipt, and he says, "Can you help me? I don't understand the machine." And I say, "We're not really allowed to leave the store during overnight shifts, as it's just me here, and it's not safe to go outside." He proceeds to say, "I don't understand what it's asking me. I need help. I'm not scary." I tell him again that I can't go outside because it's store policy for the overnight shift, and say, "It's not that you're scary, I just can't go outside." I would have to tell a little old lady asking for help at this hour the same thing. Which is true. We can't even take out the trash during overnights. He starts to walk away from the register counter now, but then again stops at the door and asks me one last time to come outside and help him. I'm pretty annoyed at this point. I've said no twice now. I'm not going, so stop asking. I finally say in a super annoyed tone, "Okay, all you need to is 1. Pick up the nozzle, 2. Select fuel grade button, and 3. Put it into your tank and squeeze the handle. I'm not going outside." Then he finally goes back to the car, and the register tells me he had no problem pumping gas. Also, his plates seem like they're from the state I work in. This kind of thing wouldn't make me suspicious usually, but the fact that he originally opted for me to go outside instead of bringing money inside is pretty weird. Along with how he didn't bother use the pump before he came inside to ask for help, claiming it doesn't work, and him not taking my first no for an answer. No means no. So potential gas station abductor, let's not meet again. I'm a 16-year-old girl, and this happened to me last year, only a few weeks after I turned 15. For some background, my sister is 3 years older than me, so this took place when she had only been around 18. She had been dating her boyfriend on and off for about 2 years. We'll name him Steven. Just so you know, my parents are divorced, so I lived with my mom, my sister, and my older brother. We had our house renovated instead of moving out when the house got cramped. You see, the layout is that there is a very small bedroom my brother has, a medium bedroom my mom has, and a large bedroom me and my sister shared. Well, as we got older, we obviously wanted our own space, so my mom had a wall built between the large room and the two smaller rooms. The only problem was that you'd have to walk through one room to get to the other. At first, I had the room that would have to be walked through by my sister, so she was able to get to her room. So, my sister is dating this guy who's the same age as our dad. Stephen also had a daughter the same age as my sister. This guy was a terrible influence on my sister. She stopped going to school, went to raves, and was introduced to drugs and all of that, and all at the hands of her boyfriend. Her boyfriend was very well known in our small village as only a few years back he had a huge drug raid at his old home. He used to also get into a lot of fights, big ones. He almost ended a guy in just a fist fight. He was also well known to be furiously beating his girlfriends. So no surprise, neither of my parents approved of him. This caused my sister to move and live with him in, as ridiculous as it sounds, his tent out in a wooded area. You see, he was living there because he became homeless. So against my mom's better judgment, she invited him to live at our house just so she'd be able to know how her daughter was doing. I'm a very reserved person and shy, especially around people I do not know, and he was very different. Obviously, I had to walk through my room to get to my sister's, and I always assumed my unease and uncomfortableness was due to not knowing him. Fast track a few weeks. By the time my sister turned 17, she found out she was pregnant. She's thrilled, but Stephen is not. My mom was disappointed my sister had gotten pregnant so young, but was happy to support her. One day, my mom finds my sister distraught, and she tells my mom that Stephen wants her to abort the baby and had forced her to take a pill which would start the process. As bad as it sounds, I didn't really zone into whatever was going on. At the time, I didn't realize I was slowly sinking into depression. Fast forward a few months, and my sister and the boyfriend decide to keep the baby. She had a growing belly while my depression worsened. At one point, I decided to try and tell my mom how I felt. She ended up sobbing and blaming herself, which only made me feel absolutely awful. Safe to say, I didn't try to tell her ever again. As the months go by, things start to get a little weird. I'd walk up in the night and find Stephen just sort of standing in my room. As soon as he was caught, he would either rush into my sister's room or out of mine and go downstairs. As uncomfortable as it made me, I didn't bother to bring it up to my mom. We weren't on the best of terms as I'd stopped going to school regularly until I was just not going anymore. The majority of the time, I would just spend in our shower room. Other strange things was the inappropriate comments on what I'd wear. I'm a well-figured girl, even from a young age, so the comments were normal from boys at my school, but it was weird coming from my sister's boyfriend. Not to mention how much older he was. There was one particular item of clothing he had liked for a silk nightgown that was a little above the knee and had a small plunge in the neckline. As you know, I'm a reserved person, so showing my body makes me very uncomfortable. But I liked this night dress because of its softness, so I did wear it a lot, but that was before I noticed his attitude towards it. To start, he simply said, "I like the night dress." I chose to just ignore him, but then he started to say, "I like the way you look in that," or "I like when you wear that." I was creeped out, and just stopped wearing anything revealing around him, in fact. I went unbothered by him for a while. Then my sister had the baby, and me and her swapped rooms as mine was slightly bigger than hers. Me and my mom were constantly arguing, well, more of her belittling me and making me feel worse than I already did. So when my nephew was born on my birthday, I spent my birthday alone the whole day, simply crying in my room. I hated living there and wanted to be anywhere else. A few weeks passed, and my mom's and my own anger reached a boiling point, and we exploded into an extremely awful shout match. I still don't know why, but Stephen decided to get involved, and also began to disrespect me. At some point, my sister pulled my mom down the stairs to try and calm her down, and left me upstairs with Stephen. He left my room, and I assumed he went downstairs. I was wrong. He had actually decided to shut my sister's door, come back into my room, and then shut my door. This is where things hit the fan. Stephen completely blows up in my face. This terrifying 6-foot-something muscular man towering over my 5'4" small frame as he shouts things that genuinely left me terrified. It gives me the shacks just recalling it. He screams in my face how if I was his daughter and I was acting like this, then he'd lock me in a room with nothing but a mattress, and I would only receive 1 meal a day. He continued to go on and on about how disgusting and disrespectful I was. I was on the verge of a panic attack. I swear I blacked out for a few seconds out of fear, which caused me to fall into my bed. He was so angry that he was physically holding himself back to not throw a punch at me. I could see it in his face. He wanted to hit me badly. He would pull his arm back as if to throw a punch, but then stop when his fist came close to my face. I thought he was going to beat me black and blue, like he was yelling in my face that he would. But the most disturbing part of this situation, the one thing that I think he said I won't be able to forget, was when he hissed quietly in my face that I deserved to be beaten, and even worse. After that, he walked out, and I sobbed against my bedroom door, terrified he would come back and keep to that promise. The next morning was a school day, and Stephen decided I needed a wake-up call at 6 a.m. and came into my room, picked me up while I was still asleep, and then dropped me. I woke up terrified and in pain. He then crouched down to be face to face with me and said if I didn't go to school, then he'd do a lot worse than that to me. He went back to my sister in her room, told her what he did, and they both laughed about it while I was crying in the next room. I went to school that day, not even bothering to retrieve my lunch from my mom. Once I was at school, I go straight to my favorite teacher and proceeded to have a complete mental breakdown. I explained what had happened and how I was too afraid to go home. Social services was called along with my mom. My mom told me the minute she found out what happened, she demanded that Stephen take his stuff and leave. After the incident, I was not allowed to go out on my own because Stephen had been threatening to kill me and set our house on fire as well. He had even attacked my older brother who had gotten stitches after having his eyebrows split open. Our house had to have a red alert on it, so if we called the police, they would come straight away. After about a month or so, it went quiet, and we didn't hear from Stephen, and I was glad for that. Then I was informed that Stephen had been arrested. The reason? He had touched one of his old exes, one that lived in the same village as me, and he was being jailed for 8 years minimum. It scared me to think that when he said I deserved to be that way, he wasn't saying it to scare me. So psycho ex-boyfriend of my sister, let's never meet again. So I had just gotten out of a pretty significant relationship with someone of 4 years, nearly engaged and moving in together. When things fell apart, I took a good amount of time to be on my own and get my stuff together again. When my friends began encouraging me to get back out there. Needless to say, I really wasn't wanting anything at that point, nor looking for anything. But they insisted that I at least go out on a few casual dates, for practice at least. Just to kind of get my skills back up for when I was ready. I think they were honestly just worried because I had become quite hermetic. So I matched with this girl, who's home from college for the summer. She's a little out of the way from me, but was eager to meet. Seemed really interested, was even willing to come to my area, etc. I really wasn't all that interested, to be truthful, but my friends again encouraged this. You know, practice. A date doesn't mean commitment, whatever. I want to be very clear, though, that I was extremely honest and explicit with her that I was not looking for anything serious, or anything really at all. I was very forthcoming that I had gotten out of something serious, and I was just kind of encouraged to explore. She persisted and still wanted to meet, so we agreed to a casual lunch in a sports bar that week. I get there, and she was already waiting for me. I was a bit put off by how much different she looked from her pictures. Not trying to sound shallow or anything, but her pics from her Tinder easily had to be at least 5 years old. When I verified based on tattoo she had in person, versus the one she didn't in the pics. So I was a bit thrown off by that. I wasn't the least bit attracted to her, but I was there just to have a new experience anyways. No big deal at all. I felt so bad because the entire time she seemed so incredibly shy and awkward. I even noticed her hand shaking when she reached for her glass, which I found endearing, honestly. So I did my best to get her talking and try to help her feel more relaxed. I asked her questions and chatted about things I figured you chat about on dates: where she grew up, music she's into, school she goes to, major, etc. All to which I literally received one-word answers. It went on like this for about an hour, and she was just not working with me at all. But I tried to keep room in my heart, because it was clear she was feeling anxious, and I understand that on a personal level. Then she pulls out this book and says, "I got this for you," and I responded very grateful, thanking her, and inquiring what it was about. Because hey, if someone wants to share a good read with me, I'm all about that. She looks at me funny and says in a very sudden but odd tone, "You're kidding, right?" I'm very confused and just kind of look at her like, "What?" And she says, "This is your favorite book. You told me this was your favorite book." To which I said, "No, I have never even heard of this before." So we concluded that she ultimately got me confused with someone else she must have been chatting with, which I honestly found hilarious. She was embarrassed, but I made light of it and said I found it funny, because I get it. That's Tinder culture, I guess. So as we finished lunch, and I'm still receiving one-word answers despite our funny moment, I kind of become a bit suggestive that we should conclude our date by saying I had to get back to feed my animals and do some laundry. But she became very adamant on spending more time and asked if we could do something else. I was genuinely trying to be decent, so I agreed, and we found a nearby park to walk in. That's where shit gets weird. We sat on a park bench. Mind you, it's broad daylight. There's kids playing basketball nearby. Folks jogging passed by. I started trying making conversation yet again, but still get the one-word answers. Then out of seemingly nowhere, without any warning whatsoever, she proceeds to kiss me really aggressively, tongue and everything. I was honestly just so shocked I stood there frozen, not knowing what to do. I had this timid, shy woman who's really not made much conversation with me at all, who was all of a sudden so nervous that she was visibly shaking, just turning into a freaking bear mauling my face in like 0.6 seconds. My head was spinning with confusion and anxiety, and I swear it felt like it lasted forever, and I just prayed for it to stop. I was too put off and honestly a bit afraid to do or say anything. Like, what do you even do in that kind of situation? I was just hoping she'd pick up on my very obvious body language, that I wasn't reciprocating anything at all. I was completely unprepared for a situation like this. Then some really nasty guy walks by, gawking and catcalling, and literally begins propositioning us into a three-way. And I'm just like, what the heck is going on? I need to get out of here. I was 1,000 different types of uncomfortable. I end up managing to ward him off after telling him very politely no more than several times. All the while, she's just laughing. And I'm thinking, who even are you? Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde over here? So he leaves, and I'm insisting now that I need to leave and just go home. She seems to ignore what I'm saying and gets very close to my face again and says, "Did you like that? Do you think I'm sexy? Do you want me?" When I tell you I was so freaking nervous, I was like, I really need to get home. And she was like, "Can I come with you?" I told her very firmly no. She literally tried to persuade me to let her come back to my place with me, and I had to say no more than 3 times. So finally, I'm home, and frankly just kind of shaken up. I hadn't really done the dating thing in quite a long time, but that felt very abnormal. She then texts me after she gets home and asks me out on a second date. And I'm very kind, despite being made incredibly uncomfortable. And I told her I thought she was a very cool chick, and I had a nice time. But I did not feel anything there, and reminded her that I wasn't looking for anything. She then text-bombed me a bunch of crazy stuff, saying how she didn't understand and was so confused, that she thought I was so into her, and that things went great. I did not respond to any of these, because now she's continuing to cross my boundaries. I said what I needed to say, and I thought I was being decent by at least being honest with her. So the text continued,
and I figured they're going to eventually stop. Because it was a first date. How can someone be so upset over someone who's not reciprocating on a first date? They did not stop, by the way. By the text, you would have thought that we just ended a 2-year relationship. Then she began calling, at which point I had to block her phone number. So Nightmare Tender Girl, for the love of everything, let's never, ever meet again, please.
Okay, so this started happening exactly a year ago. I was living in another city, attending university, my freshman year, and my then roommates were moving out due to them finishing their education. I needed to start looking for a new place, and I found 2 apartments, one in the center of my city, and the other nearby where I was located. Long story short, I moved into the other one, which was populated by 2 guys. One of them, we'll call him Matt. Matt had great taste in music, had great friends. It was like the best friend I ever met. One of those people with whom you want to hang out with your whole life. The other one, Norris, well, I never got along with him, mostly for him being the kind of guy that liked to follow others around, like he had no backbone. Whatever Matt did, Norris did as well. After a week of smoking weed, hanging out, and just having the best days of our lives, another guy moves in, Dan. Dan had a dog with him, but his dog left soon after, because he destroyed some wooden door, and it was either him or the dog. Matt had a girlfriend, Tina, that particularly lived with us. You know, love and everything. Now, one day, Dan and I were sitting outside on our little terrace eating and drinking coffee, usual morning routine, and Tina came to sit with us. She had a large bruise mark on her shoulder. We asked her how did that happen. She said that Matt hit her, and we just brushed it off, thinking that she's messing with us. A few days pass. It was a Tuesday night. I was in my room doing a seminar for a subject, and I heard a loud bang, like a bomb that went off near my head. I got up from my chair all nervous, went to investigate. On the other end of the hallway, I saw Matt's hand on Tina's throat, and him saying some things to her in a very rough voice. Matt had a glass door, and while this was happening, there was no more glass on the door. They argued, she cried, and they both went into the night. The very next day, Tina told me and Dan that Matt used her head to break the glass from the door. The most insane part about this was that they kissed and made up. They loved each other again. After a shitstorm like that, she even made us lunch as an apology. I honestly thought I was losing my mind. Of course, things didn't end there. It was Friday, 3 days after the incident. That day, I planned on going to Slash and Miles Kennedy concert in the other city, but due to the university and having to take an exam that day, I put my priorities straight, sold the ticket, and went to take my exam. Later that day, Matt, Tina, and Norris were going out. Me and Dan stayed in, because Dan had no money, and I felt like staying inside. He was giggling the entire time, so I asked, "What was it?" He replied that it was shrooms. So I decided to take some money and try them. We went to his friend's house, where we got my dose. I hung out there for a bit, and then we returned to our home. We were having a blast. I can't even describe the feeling. We were happy, and we didn't know what was coming to us next. At around 1 a.m., Matt bursted into the apartment and started packing some stuff. We assumed he and Tina had another fight. He was yelling at us to turn down the music. He had a really psychotic look in his face. We went outside after him to see Tina sitting on a short brick wall across our house, in tears, with a bone coming out of her leg and blood coming out of her mouth. So yeah, he broke her leg and knocked her tooth out, and that was all happening in the street while Norris was watching without doing anything to stop Matt on their way to the apartment. Me and Dan were out of our minds with what we were just witnessing. Being on shrooms and experiencing something so traumatizing was insane. We contemplated calling the cops, but both Tina and Matt disagreed. Matt and Norris took Tina to a cab and into a hospital. There, she lied and said she fell on some stairs. Me and Dan were outside the whole night, just trying to pull all the pieces together. Dan told me that M did stuff like this before, to every girl he had. He was just very good at masking his wild side from everyone. Dan went home that morning, and I stayed alone in a nut house. Just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard a girl's voice, and I really thought I lost it by this point. But when I woke up, Tina was again there. Her leg was taken care of in the hospital. She had a cast on it. I talked with Matt about it, and he told me that most craziest thing I've ever heard. That some people express their love in that way. He being one of them. I talked with her for some time, trying to get her to leave and never come back, and to call the police. She packed her stuff, and we went outside, waiting for her friends to come and pick her up. Matt stormed outside with a big knife in his hand. I cannot even express how his eyes looked. He told us if we mentioned this to anyone, he'd come after us and end us. In that moment, I knew the man I once met, the greatest friend in the world, was long gone, and I needed to get it out of there as soon as possible. I left that day, called every number in my phone, left a lot of my things there, but I didn't care. My life was on the line. Settled at a friend's home, and lived there for a while. My university was ending, exams were coming, and I went home to clear my head. When I returned, I had a conversation with Tina, and she told me she called the cops on him. He was then awaiting trial. Don't know what happened since I lost contact with Tina, and I really don't want to remind her on the horrible things he did to her. Now, I know why I didn't engage him. I had a couple of chances, mostly because after every fight they had, they would get together again like nothing ever happened. And due to the fact that Matt was a capoeira expert, while I was this guy that went to a gym rarely, and that Matt was really crazy and unpredictable. So Matt, let's not meet ever again.
My friend and I grew up in a very small town in Michigan, and one fall night when we were 16, we decided to go for an evening walk to talk about things. We walked all over the neighborhood, deep in conversation, when we finally wound up back at my house. She only lived a few blocks away, and said she didn't mind walking back by herself. Maybe 10 minutes later, she calls me whispering, saying that a man was following her, and asked me to meet her at the elementary school, which was pretty much halfway between both of our houses. I was really freaked out, so I asked my brother to come with me. My brother and I met her at the elementary school, and she said that she was walking home when she noticed a man walking behind her. Didn't think anything of it until she crossed the street, and he followed. He then proceeded to start walking faster and faster, getting closer and closer to her. She then got really scared and sprinted through the elementary school lot, where he proceeded to chase after her. As soon as she got to the back of the school, she hid in a little alcove and watched the guy stand frantically looking for her. He eventually left, which was when she called me. I don't know why none of us thought to call the cops, but I still wonder what would have happened. Looking back on it, I wonder if he saw us walking and decided to wait for one of us to walk back once it got dark. So creepy guy at our elementary school, let's not meet again.
This was a strange encounter. It was very scary at the time, but when I tell people about this story, they usually don't think it was something to freak out about. Last Thanksgiving, I was driving home from college with a friend. I live in a very isolated part of Arkansas that requires driving through an hour of hairpin turns in the mountains. There are lots of blind turns, and the whole time you're driving on the edge of huge drop-offs with no barriers. I'm usually pretty confident in driving through the mountains, but we were in my friend's car, so I was going slower than usual, driving about 5 over the speed limit. Almost as soon as we started the roughest part of the drive, another car was tailgating us pretty close. This was stressing me out, and as soon as I saw somewhere I could pull over, I did. I pulled into a church parking lot, and my friend offered to drive the rest of the way, but I declined as it was completely dark, and she had never driven this route before. We get back on our way, and a few minutes later I have to come to a screeching halt as there's a car stopped in the middle of the road. It wasn't on the shoulder at all, just stopped dead in the middle of the road. My friend is saying that they must have broken down, but can't call a tow because there's no service in this area. I immediately have a bad feeling and lock the doors. I tell my friend to stay in the car no matter what. She is starting to get scared at this point and points out that she thinks that is the car that was following us. I can't tell, but I am very scared at this point. It's parked right before a hairpin turn, so I can't pass it. My friend starts frantically telling me to go ahead and pass it, but I don't want to get hit by a Mack truck or fall off the mountainside. I honk my horn, nothing happens. No chance of calling for help as there is no cell service out here. We wait there for a while doing nothing. My friend is crying and freaking out, but I'm too scared to try and pass them. I honk a couple of times, and eventually a guy gets out of the car, comes around back, and leans against his car just staring at us. My friend is freaking out even more, and I'm just frozen. I tell her not to make eye contact. I'm ready to floor it if he does something, but he just stands there and stares. He's not checking his car or anything. I try to stay calm and pray that another car will come along very soon. This goes on for what seems like forever, but probably about 15 or so minutes. He's just casually leaning up against his car looking at us. Eventually we see car lights in our rearview mirror, and then the guy jogs to his door and then gets back into his car. He speeds off, going dangerously fast. So there was nothing wrong with his car. I start driving, not wanting to cause a wreck. We don't see anything else for a while, but we pass the same car parked along the highway a little while later. And it pulls back on and starts tailing us again. I try to speed up and get rid of him, but he keeps following. We have cell service at this point, but I don't know if we should call the cops because nothing really has happened. I call home and tell my brother what's going on, and tell them to wait on the porch for us. The car follows me all the way home down the really long drive to my house. I get to my house, and my two brothers are waiting on the porch holding their deer rifles. I pull in, and the car just goes to the end of the drive, loops around, and speeds off back the way it came. We try to see its plates, but we couldn't make them out. My friend and I were really freaked out, but I told her friends the whole story, and they didn't think it was that big of a deal.
This incident occurred a few days ago. My husband and I went to visit my sister, who recently went through surgery and has been stuck at home, at her doctor's request. We wanted to go visit to check up on her, and gave her some company. The trip to my sister's is almost an hour drive away. We got about halfway there, and my husband decided to stop to grab something to drink, and a snack to share with our 2-year-old, since he was getting pretty fussy. We stop at a gas station that we have stopped at before on previous trips. It's a nice gas station. It's as nice as gas stations come. He parks at the gas pumps and locks our daughter and I in. As soon as my husband goes into the store, this man pops out of nowhere. Kind of startled me off my phone. He started creeping around our vehicle. We made eye contact, and he kept looking at the driver's side and then back at me. The look he gave was that "I'm thinking of hopping in your truck" look. We kept steady eye contact. He then started pacing back and forth. Eventually, some random man came back to his vehicle that was parked at another gas pump nearby, and we made eye contact because this man was acting quite strange. The man then started walking away towards the man at the other pump, still holding eye contact with me though. At this point, I'm paranoid and thinking about how I'll defend myself if things take a turn. I'm clenching my phone and hoping I don't have to dial 911. He crept past the other guy and then walks towards the store behind us. Only he went walking past towards the wooded area nearby and just stood there, watching me. As we're still making eye contact, because I was looking back, I noticed my husband walking back out from the store. The man walked past my husband and went into the store as soon as he saw him walking to our truck. My husband gets in the truck and says, "The door wasn't even locked. I guess I didn't lock it." Ha ha ha. That's when I tell him what I went through while he was in the store. After that, not locking the door wasn't so funny anymore. I assumed this man was on something because of the way he was acting. He wasn't fully there, and it was very clear to myself and the other man at the pump who sat put in his car until he saw my husband come back in. I'm not sure what his intentions could have been, but it seemed as though he wanted to get into the truck. But what would the intentions from that point forward be? I'm just glad that he didn't decide to be a creep and not. I hate getting gas at night. I have learned to avoid it, as I've had some strange encounters that have left me feeling uncomfortable. But none as bad as this one. I had just picked my sister up from college, and we got on the highway to get home. My gas light had come on. It was getting dark out. I was kicking myself for not getting gas sooner, but it made me feel safer that I had my sister with me. So I get off the highway and pull into the closest gas station I can find. It was pretty empty. I had just put the pump in the car when I heard, "Hey, sweetheart, you from around here?" I jumped. This man had seemed to have appeared out of thin air. He was tall, older, and disheveled. His clothes baggy and twisted. Immediately I felt uncomfortable, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions or be rude, so I answered with a vague answer, "Yeah, kinda." He started asking me more questions, taking a step closer to me with each question. He was rattling them off so quickly, I didn't have time to answer them. The questions were getting more and more personal, and he was getting closer and closer. I was getting increasingly uncomfortable. Then finally he asked, "Are you married?" For context, I am 23, but I've been told I still look like a teenager. This question obviously took me by surprise. I didn't know how to answer. It finally clicked what he was doing, trying to see if I was there with anyone who would look for me if I disappeared. This realization sent shivers down my spine. I shouted at him, "Get away from me!" Startled, he jumped back and said, "You ungrateful, entitled bitch," and kept cursing at me as he walked away. It took me about 30 minutes to stop shaking. Creepy old dude at the gas station. Let's not meet ever again.
I've lived most of my life way out in the valley countryside of Ontario. Given, that's not a whole lot for an 18-year-old, but for me, it's the only place that I can call home, and I like to think that I know the entire area, like the back of my hand at least. Adventures across the long, crossing roads, pastures, and woods that made up the skeleton of my village were a common venture in my childhood. As a young kid, I had a habit of biking extremely far out in hopes of finding new places, and sometimes my dad or one of my friends' parents would toss out bikes in their backyard and take us way out to the back road and let us explore for a few hours. This was how a lot of us first found that one of these crappy gravel surroundings by thin woods was a worn-down old shack, sitting there about 20 meters off the path. Honestly, I never thought anything of it, except for the fact that it was creepy. It had no windows to see inside, and I never went anywhere near it. But one of my friends at the time said that her older sister had tried to go in, and that the door was completely locked. We all had better things to be curious about at the time than that anyways, so I quickly moved on, and it became nothing more than a mundane landmark of the area. Honestly, I had completely forgotten about it for a few years now, except for last Tuesday. I was coming home from one of my very late classes at my university, and I usually take the back roads I perused many years ago, as they're more straightforward and scarcely ever have any sort of traffic. as I drove down the gravel path that would wind along the side of the country and eventually take me to the next street that I needed to turn onto. I noticed a faint glinting coming from within the trees up ahead, maybe about 100 meters from my car. Was it a flashlight, I thought? But as my car came closer, I realized what I was really seeing. The light inside of the shack was on. I should mention now that all of the nearly 13 years that I've spent living in my area, I have never seen the door open, and I have never seen a light on inside of that shack, ever. Not even once. I must have driven past that shack probably almost 100 times in my life, but this was the first time I'd ever seen any sign of a person's presence having been anywhere near that thing. That, coupled with the fact that it was 10 o'clock at night, and pitch black outside aside from my headlights, and the faint, incandescent glow light up from the door frame up ahead, immediately filled me with what I can only describe as a weird sense of dread. It would be hard for most people not to immediately be unsettled by something like that, and I am someone who's easily spooked. Fortunately, while my car approached the light, I was curious enough, despite the feeling in my stomach. I slowed down as I was about to pass, hoping that I would see what was going on inside. And this is probably the only reason I managed to spot the dark shape that burst out of the foliage on the side of the road, directly into my path. I wasn't going very fast at that point, but I was still pounding the brakes rather hard in alarm, so my car came to a crunching stop on the gravel. For a moment, I was just really confused and freaked out. What was that? Had I almost hit a deer or something? This is far out in the country. A deer would have been the most likely and most reasonable assumption. But in my beams of the car, I could see what had stopped me. A very tall, very lanky old man with scraggly and balding gray hair. Right away I got that impression that this man was very poor. He looked dirty and unkempt, and his clothes hung off of him. However, I'm generally used to seeing people who aren't that well off in my town, and I don't like to judge people right away based off of the sort of thing. So, I was mostly just extremely unsettled over what the hell this guy was doing way out here, and why he had just walked out in front of my car. As I sat there confused, the old man came around to my window and knocked on the glass. Feeling my memories of stranger danger, conversations with my parents kicking in, as old as those conversations were, I rolled down the window just a crack, only enough for someone to be able to hear me and for me to hear them. I was already creeped out enough as it was. Immediately, I had to say what I was thinking. What are you doing out here?" I asked. In my peripheral vision, I could still see the light from the shack, but in my mind's eye, I wasn't really registering it anymore. Stupid, I know. I should have made the connection immediately, but I was still kind of shaken by the fact that I could have run this guy over if I hadn't been able to stop in time. And being a new driver, and all the thought of that was terrifying. After a small pause, the man started talking to me. He had a thick, croaky sort of voice, and he spoke very slowly. "My truck, it's broken down," he explained. "Oh, okay." I was also getting the feeling that he wasn't really all there, mentally at least. I didn't have to look around to notice there wasn't any truck on the side of the road, but I did anyways. Turning my head around to confirm what I already knew, there was definitely no truck. Had he somehow driven it into the tree or something? As far as I could remember and see, there wasn't enough space anywhere in them for a truck to fit through. What was the man talking about? While I was looking, it was honestly as though I could feel that he was watching me, and when I turned back, he was still leaning down to peer inside of my window at me. "Where? I don't see it," I blurted out. I was definitely distrustful of this guy already. At first, he didn't respond, and my nerves were only getting worse the longer we were alone out here. Then he replied, "It's just up the road," he said, just turning to the point with his finger at this general direction. The lights on my car aren't exactly the greatest, but I could still see far enough that I really couldn't imagine where on earth this truck was supposed to be. I couldn't spot the faintest sight of it. While I squinted up ahead, he continued,
I'll show you where, if you come.
At this point, I really had no idea what this old man was thinking I could do to help. I'm 18 years old, female, and very petite. I don't exactly look like the type of person who knows a lot about cars or how to fix them. And for the record, I'm really not. But as I was tired from a long day at school, so I absolutely was not at my brightest. And for some reason, a part of me felt guilty about leaving him out here alone if the truck was really broken. Okay, I said, and I reached to my gear shift to start driving slowly up the road. But as soon as he saw my hand, he shook his head.
It's up ahead. It's not that far.
What? Excuse me, but no thanks. How the hell was I going to see anything in the dark if I got out of my car and followed him anyway? There is no harm in driving wherever he was trying to lead me. The more I talked to the guy, the more unnerved I was getting, and the more red flags were starting to pop up in my mind. I couldn't see a car anywhere, and this total stranger wanted me to get out of mine and follow him into the dark on this creepy road in the middle of nowhere. I will admit, I am a bit of a naive person, but I am definitely not that stupid. So, no. I'd rather drive to it, I responded. This situation really wasn't making any sense to me. I could see his brow furrow, and he looked kind of agitated. He insisted,
Your car won't fit in there anyways.
So, did his truck crash then? Why the trees? If we were going up the road. I remember what I'd just been thinking a minute earlier about there not being enough space, and I asked him, then how did yours get in the trees? The logical explanation would have been that his truck had swerved off the road. But even if that were the case, there was seriously nothing at all that I could have done to help him fix his car or get it back out again. It genuinely made no sense at all to be asking me to come and help him, and the entire situation was beginning to make me very scared. There was a lengthy enough pause between my question and him speaking up that I was beginning to think he didn't hear me or something. So I asked again. Still no immediate answer. When he finally did reply, he was staring at me directly in the eyes. I think I'm going to have nightmares about it for a long time. It was so sudden, and the way he said it was just so unbelievably creepy.
You don't look old enough to drive.
I hear comments like this a lot, since I do look very young because of my size. Normally someone would say this with a smile, or something to signify that this is in fact meant to be taken as a joke. But the guy's face didn't change even slightly. He just kept staring at me with a completely cold expression. The sheer inappropriateness of such a remark in that kind of situation immediately made my heart race. And all I could think of was, holy crap, what did this guy want with me? What I wanted to say next was, who the hell are you? But instead, I anxiously fumbled for my phone in my pocket, babbling in a way that probably made it really obvious I was completely freaked out of my mind. Okay. I can just call someone to help you out. There's not really anything that I can do. As I said that, it occurred to me to wonder, what did this old guy not have a cell phone of his own? I know every older person has one, even if they're becoming much more common. But seriously. And then, I also remembered, with a sudden streak of massive fear, the shack with the light on. I could still see the light coming from it just up ahead in the trees, and my dumb brain finally put two and two together. The old man hadn't even mentioned it at all. It was like it wasn't even there to him, and there was definitely no one out here that could have turned the light on, but the guy who was standing outside my car right now. What was he doing out here in that shack? Then, which had been locked for all these years by someone I never knew. There was definitely no truck around here. He wanted me out of my car for another reason. I think maybe the old man must have seen my face, that I was scared out of my wits, and about to book it out of there. Instead of any words, without warning, his face contorted with rage, and he swung his fist, pounding it against my window with enough strength to make it shudder.
His eyes were wide, and he looked furious and completely freaking insane. Even though I was panicking more than I had ever done in my life, and I was sure he was about to smash the window in if he tried again, I screamed, threw my phone onto the floor, switched gears, and slammed my foot down on the gas pedal. I hurtled down the road, and when I glanced into my rearview mirror, I saw his dark shape turn from standing in the road, and I watched as he turned, and he walked off the road, directly back towards the light of the shack. I didn't slow down at all until I was nearly home, and absolutely sure that there was no one that could have been following me. When I got home that night, I spent a long time crying about what had happened with my mom, and though I don't think she believed all of what I told her, she called up everyone she knew to ask if anyone knew the old man, or if they knew who owned the shack. In a town like ours, just about everyone knows each other, and no one had any clue who he was. One of our family friends even swore that he was sure that it had been abandoned for at least 4 years now. And since most people don't usually take that road, no one said that they've ever seen a light on or the door open but me. I've been taking a different route from home to school ever since, and I really don't think I ever want to head back down that road. Creepy guy in the shack, please, let's not meet again. This happened about 3 years ago when I was a senior in high school. My now ex-boyfriend and I were in the car. We went to meet another couple at the movies after a basketball game just to kill some time. We were all bored, and none of us wanted to go home. We went to the 10:30 showing of Dear John, which, by the way, I fell asleep in. I didn't care for romantic movies much, and the only good part had to be Channing Tatum. Anyways, the movie ended, and we all piled into our cars. I had to take my boyfriend home because he didn't have his license yet. I hated the back roads, but they were much quicker than going through town, and most likely being stopped at every single red light. He lived out in the middle of absolutely nowhere. We're about 5 minutes away from his house when my headlights reveal a young woman standing in the road frantically waving her arms, flagging me down. It's about midnight at this point, and I'm wondering if maybe, possibly her car broke down. I felt nothing wrong with this situation, so I pulled over to the side of the road. I might want to mention in advance that I am so freaking stupid for doing this. She rushes up to the car and asks if we can give her a lift. She tells us that her boyfriend and her got into a fight, and he forced her out of his car, and she was walking home. She still had about 10 miles to go. I felt bad for her, but I still was suspicious. I told her she could use my cell phone if she needed to, and then made up an excuse that I didn't have enough gas to get her where she wanted to go. She said she would give me money, and then out of nowhere she starts looking at me and smiling. She kept repeating things like, "Oh my God, I know you. I remember. Don't you remember me?" I have never before seen this woman in my whole life. She kept saying things like, "How could you refuse a ride to someone you know? I'm not a stranger." I only had my window cracked about 3 inches at this point, and when I kept refusing her a ride, she got angry and cursed at me, calling me all kinds of names. She reached in the car and tried hitting me when I rolled up the window, and caught her fingers in the window between the frame and the glass. She screamed. I unrolled it enough so that she could remove her fingers, and quickly locked my door before she tried that. Out of nowhere, a man comes out from the wooded area next to the road. This guy was huge. He looked like a security guard that you would see with like Beyonce, or something protecting her from the paparazzi. I was frozen. My boyfriend slowly took his cell phone from his pocket and dialed 911. He hit my hood and demanded that I get out of the car, or he was going to pull a gun on me. I snapped back into reality and put my car in reverse. I swerved around the man and the woman as tears were pouring out of my eyes. The adrenaline had finally gotten to me, and I realized that we had just gotten out of something that could have been a very awful ending for us. We reached my boyfriend's house and waited for the police. They took our information, and we told them what had happened. They made their way back to the spot, and found burlap sacks, a gun, a knife, a rope, and a camera. They also found tire marks where a car had been parked in the wooded area. What did they want with us? Most likely, I will never find out. This has to be the scariest thing that has ever happened to me, but I am so happy that I got out safe and alive. I remembered something that happened to my best friend and I a few years ago, and figured I might share it here. While my best friend... We went on a weekend trip to visit my grandmother a couple hours away from my town in Georgia. The town we lived in was comparatively small for the state, but one of the biggest towns within just a few hours. But we had to travel about 2.5 hours through tiny, somewhat redneck towns to get to my grandmother's place. We were on our way back home when we had to stop at a gas station literally in the middle of nowhere. I'm talking cornfields, cotton fields, streets with no signs or lights, not even stop signs, and definitely no cell service. The convenience store attached to the gas station had maybe a couple snacks inside, but looked deserted from the outside, and we didn't bother to get anything other than gas. I paid with my card, mainly because I didn't want to leave my 5'1", 100-pound friend alone in the car while I went alone inside. Another car pulled up on the other side of the single gas pump while I started pumping gas. And because everything that I've read on this subreddit, I already had a weird feeling and decided to stay alert and stand outside of the car with my driver's side door open so my friend could see and hear everything going on. A thin, late 50-year-old man got out of the car and seemed to be paying at the pump and standing beside his car while he got gas. But after a few seconds, he walked around the pump and maneuvered himself around my car door to stand within a foot of me and asked if he could pump my gas for me. Luckily, the gas nozzle was locked, so it was pumping without me having to hold it, and I immediately placed myself between the opening of the door and the man, and prepared to either shut the door with me inside it or move and slam it behind me to protect my friend if necessary. I calmly told him it was fine. No, thank you. He looked me up and down with the corner of his lip tilted up and said, "Pretty girls like you shouldn't be out here all alone. And you definitely shouldn't have to do this by yourself. Let a man help you, baby." And covered my hand with his own as he reached for the gas pump that I was holding. I jerked my hand out from underneath his and slammed my door shut. Orange flags turned red, and my usual over-polite demeanor turned serious as I remembered something I'd read here that said it was better to be safe and to seem mean rather than polite and uncomfortable. So I responded and said, "Sir, get away from me. I can pump my own gas, and I've already said no thank you. Leave us alone." He didn't move, only raised his chin, and managed to make eye contact with me, all lip tilt gone. I stared him down and figured I'd gotten enough gas to last us enough time to get the hell out of wherever we were. So I maintained eye contact, pulled the nozzle out, and basically threw it back into the pump before getting in my car, and drove away before he had even moved. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw that his car wasn't even being filled up with gas, telling me he was driving by and decided to help a damsel in distress. My friend was shaking the whole way home, telling me she would have just let the man pump her gas. But I'm just glad some of the confidence I've gained from this sub helped me stay attentive and respond confidently enough to get out of the situation. So this actually happened about a week ago. I frequent this sub pretty often, and growing up in a not-so-savory area, I've met my fair share of weirdos, but this really struck a nerve with me recently. A little background. I work for a marketing firm that promotes high-end cosmetics, so every day I go business to business selling these makeup sets to whoever will buy one. Many of our sales are made to customers in parking lots or at a gas station. This story takes place at a gas station in a relatively rural area. Generally, we will park at a gas station to start the day, make our promo bags, use the bathroom, etc. We pull up
and there's no parking spots available, so I decided to pull up to a pump because we weren't planning on staying very long. Me and my partner both go in to use the urination station. I end up finishing before he does, and go back to the car to start making my promo bags for the day. As I'm doing this, an old rickety pickup truck pulls up to the pump opposite mine. The man who gets out looks like he's seen better days. His beard was yellowing, and he looked disheveled. As I'm making my bags, I feel him staring at me, so I figured, hey, let's see if he's got any ladies in his life that like makeup, and casually start pitching to him. He lights up immediately, and quickly moves over to my side of the pump, claiming his hearing was going, and couldn't hear what I was saying. I repeat myself, and he barely acknowledged any mention of the makeup and starts commenting on how pretty I am. This might have been sweet, but the way he was looking and talking about me made me a little unsettled. I chalked it up to him being a little not all there, and kind of tried to end the conversation politely. No, he would not take the hint. He was now standing close enough that I could smell him, and I was getting visibly uncomfortable and hoping my partner would come back soon. At this point, he had said some pretty vulgar things about my body that I tried ignoring with some awkward laughter. When out of nowhere, he grabs my hand and held it to his chest and told me how great it was that I didn't have a ring and that I was unmarried. I didn't get to react really. My partner had come up behind me, apparently amused by what was going on until he saw that look on my face. When he sees my partner, he immediately backs off and goes into the gas station, and I tell my partner how uncomfortable and weirded out I was. Keep in mind, I met my fair share of creepy dudes daily working a door-to-door sales job, and I'm usually pretty unfazed by it. So thinking he's gone, we both laugh it off and continue our bag making. My partner goes off to pitch a few ladies smoking outside on the side of the gas station, and almost on cue, this guy walks back out and makes a beeline towards me. Cue more inappropriate comments and attempted hand-holding. I was giving obvious signs that I did not want anything to do with this man, but he either didn't recognize this or didn't care. He started talking about how I should come back with him to meet his many dogs and cats, and how his trailer was right down the road. The last straw was when he put his one hand on my lower back and the other reaching towards my face. I don't know why I froze. I half squirmed away when I heard my partner shout from across the parking lot and turned to see him fast walking towards us. Again, the man backs off, but my partner let him hear it this time. Everyone around us is looking now. He mumbles something and then got in his truck and left. I'm still mad at myself for not speaking up. I like to hope that if I was alone, I would have been able to get out of that situation, but I'm thankful my partner was there to help scare him off.
My wedding was set for September 1st. I checked every weather report for the area going back 5 years. It had not rained on that date for all of the 5 years. Just in case, I decided to have my wedding at a golf course inside the ballroom. We had a bouncy house planned for the kids. My husband was in the military, so he was going to have a sword ceremony as we ran out to our car. We had family and friends from Italy, China, the Philippines, and Romania fly in for our wedding in Salt Lake City. It all went to shit when it began to rain. We canceled the bouncy house on the way to the venue, and we're thanking our lucky stars we had planned on having it inside. Well, we are halfway through dinner when it began to hail. Hail the size of golf balls fell and dented the cars, cracked windshields, and brought everyone on the patio inside. We were in the middle of cutting the cake when the cops came into the venue and had to evacuate our wedding because there were flash floods. Everyone dashed to their cars and had to go around the opposite side of the entire lake. The golf course was on because the flash floods had wiped out the roads. We had to pick up multiple people who were broken down on the side of the road because they didn't have gas in their damn cars. And there were absolutely no gas stations on that side of the lake. Oh, and to top it all off, my ex-boyfriend showed up to crash my wedding and have sex with my bridesmaids in the venue bathroom before we got kicked out. The venue flooded a few hours after our evacuation.
Cheers to the most memorable wedding ever. Mine, of course. This is by far the weirdest experience I have ever had. This is a long post, so bear with me. When I was 6 years old, I had a neighborhood friend named Trevor who was way older than me. Like 6 years older than me, to be exact. I always thought of him like the older brother I never had. My sister was about his age, but she always thought he was weird, so she never hung out with him. In fact, I realized no one in the neighborhood really liked to be around him, but for some reason, I did. Maybe it was because I felt bad that he had no friends, or just for the fact he treated me so nicely like his little sister. I would always tell him, "You're like a brother I wish I had." And he'd reply, "We're more than that." At first I thought he meant best friends, but it turned out it meant something more. About a year later, my sister and I moved with my mom to my grandparents' home because my parents were struggling with their marriage and needed to take a break. That break lasted for about 2 whole years, until my parents finally decided that things were okay between them and we moved back into my old house. When I returned, the kids in the neighborhood were gone, but there was one familiar face I recognized: Trevor. I remember being so excited to see him, and I ran to hug him, but he placed his hand in front of himself as if to halt me. I stopped and felt confused. I thought maybe he didn't recognize me, because I was now 10 years old, taller, and my hair was much longer. I began telling him that it was me, and that I was back, and that I missed him so much. He looked at me with anger plastered on his face and said something like, "Why did you leave me?" I don't know if things could ever be the same again. I tried explaining to him what happened, but he would interrupt me with, "You're a bad liar. I know you ran off with someone else." I was even more confused and promised him I didn't. At the time, I never thought anything weird about it, because I was so young and just really wanted my friend back. He wouldn't talk to me for a few days, until he finally forgave me. We continued our adventures and played together like old times. But there were some things that did change. Trevor was now a freshman in high school, and he would always bring up stuff he learned in health class, like the male and female anatomy. He would show me pictures of a penis and vagina that was from his textbook, and would teach me about them. I kind of knew what they were, but had no idea what a penis looked like, and no offense, men, but I thought it was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. I would tell him I didn't want to see those pictures anymore, but he kept saying that I needed to learn for later on. Later, he would begin telling me about sexual intercourse and how it was done. I was really annoyed and let him know that by raising my voice to him, he finally stopped schooling me and things went back to normal. Fast forward 2 years. I was 12 years old now and in 6th grade. I felt so mature and like a woman now that I had hit puberty. I made a lot of new friends, but they were just school friends. I would always come to see Trevor, who was now 17. I was beginning to notice how strange he was when he kept wanting to play house with me. I didn't want to because I felt too mature to play childish games anymore. He would always beg me to play one last time, so I gave in. He asked me if I had started my cycle yet, and since we knew each other for so long and was comfortable with him, I told him yes. He would continue to ask me strange questions about if I had pubic hair and what size bra I wore. I would fake laugh it off and tell him that it was too nosy. So we were about to play our usual house when he decided to change things up by pretending that we were a couple about to get married. He made us dress up in formal attire and literally did everything that happened at a wedding. He even had fake rings to go along with it and sealed our marriage with a peck on the cheek. And whenever I tried to take the ring off, he would get mad and tell me that it was a gift and that it would be rude of me not to wear it every day. I kept the ring on around him, but would take it off whenever I wasn't. Months went by, and I continued to notice how much weirder Trevor was,
and I especially noticed how much more sexual he had become. I even had to ask him to leave my 13th birthday party because of how sexual he was acting with my other friends. Plus, he would constantly tell them that I was his wife and we had rings to prove it. I would tell them that it was our friendship ring, to which he was irritated by. Months later, I came home from school and was surprised to discover a bouquet of flowers and a card on top of my dresser. In the card read something like, "Happy anniversary. Can't believe it's been a year already. Yours truly, Trevor." I was so annoyed that he still played out the "we were married" fantasy. I was mad at my parents for letting him into my room without my permission. My parents told me that they never let him into my room. In fact, they never even saw him. I was creeped out. I would try my best to avoid Trevor and tell him that I had a lot of homework. When we did hang out, he would make me feel uncomfortable with his comments, and he always tried to make me feel guilty for not getting him an anniversary gift. I got even more creeped out when he would say, "You know, you never really got to finish our wedding yet. We still have our honeymoon left." His creepiness got to the point where he could call me at ungodly hours in the night to tell me how much he appreciated me, or just to say hello. I ended up ignoring his calls and put my phone on silent. Once I did that, he would literally show up at my bedroom window and tap on it until I would wake up. My sister would sometimes hear him and would tell him to go away if he didn't want her to call the cops. He stopped coming around, or at least I thought he did. I would start to notice things in my room not the way they were before. For example, my bed covers would be messed up when I knew for a fact that I made my bed before I left for school. The decorations in my room would be placed in different locations or would vanish. I blamed my sister for those things, but she swore it wasn't her. Things got even more strange with Trevor, and I no longer enjoyed his presence anymore. But one day, everything changed, and I never saw him again. It was like he vanished. One day he was a creep, and the next he was just gone. I asked my parents if they knew where he had gone, and they said that he left to go live with his uncle or something in Illinois. I was so relieved to know he was out of my life. As years passed and I graduated high school, I never saw Trevor. I would sometimes see his mom outside, but she would never make eye contact with me. In fact, I noticed that she looked kind of nervous when she saw me. I never really knew Trevor's mom. She was always in her room when I would go to their house. I barely could get a full sentence out of her. Trevor always said she was super shy. I visited home for summer after finishing my first year of college. I was extremely happy to be home in my old room, which was basically a guest room now that I was gone. I was going through old stuff of mine my mom had packed into boxes when I noticed the ring that Trevor had given me. I picked it up and showed it to my mom, telling her about the odd time Trevor made me marry him, etc., and how weird that he left without saying goodbye when he was mad at me for leaving all those years ago. He was such a hypocrite, I said. When I mentioned him, the look of concern was apparent on her face. I asked her what was wrong, and that was when she told me the truth about what happened to Trevor. Apparently, while we were all asleep, my father woke up to some noise. He waved it off as my sister, or me just using the restroom or something, and tried going back to sleep. Then he began hearing different noises. He said it sounded like someone was crying. He thought one of us was having a nightmare and got up to go check on us. He goes to check on my sister when he noticed the sound was coming from my bedroom. He was using his cell phone as light, and when he was close enough to see into my whole room, what he saw shocked and angered him. There, in all of his naked glory, was Trevor staring down at me as I slept. Those weren't cries my dad heard. Those were Trevor's moans from him touching himself. My dad says, "What the fuck?" and begins marching closer to my room, but Trevor hears him and runs out of there. By this time, my mom was awake because she wanted to know what was going on. My dad told her to stay inside while he went to Trevor's house to beat the life out of him. Of course he didn't. His mom begged him not to and said that it wasn't his fault and that he had a mental illness. Apparently, Trevor kept repeating that he and I were married and that he was just trying to consummate our marriage. That really sickened and pissed my dad off. My dad threatened him by saying if he ever saw his face again, that he would kill him. And from that day on, we never saw him again. To this day, I still do not know where he went. Hopefully, his mom got him some help, because he definitely needed it after what I experienced, and from what my mom told me. It gives me the shivers and really disturbs me. So Trevor, let's not meet, and I want a divorce. I was walking home at 1 a.m. on a Sunday morning. It was a transition between autumn and winter. Cold, but no snow or rain. Just cold and overcast. This night it had gotten cold to the point where it was foggy as well. All was silent, and for whatever reason, there wasn't any cars around. The street lights were very dim as well. I had 2 paths to get me home. The route with street lights that feels a bit safer, but it was really long, or the back road that doesn't have any lights, but it only takes about 5 minutes walking versus 15 to 20. Me being my lazy self, I decided on the latter of the two, the unlit route. About halfway through, I hear footsteps behind me, a fair distance away, but loud enough to hear nonetheless. I decide to look back, but see nobody behind me due to the fog. I decided to wait, and saw a dark silhouette of a woman walking. She seemed young from what I could see. I'd say she was about mid-20s. I thought nothing of her, and turned back and moved on. Suddenly I hear her footsteps speed up. Becoming slightly paranoid, I increase my walking speed a bit. She continues to walk even faster. I look back and she breaks into a full-blown sprint towards me. I could see an intersection ahead and was about 200 feet from the road, which I crossed to get to the condo that I live in. Adrenaline kicks in and I sprint all the way to the intersection without even looking back. Once I got to the intersection, I stopped and out of breath. I looked back to see nothing but fog. The woman had disappeared. All of a sudden, from within the fog, I hear a loud cackling laugh, similar to the one you'd hear from a witch in a movie. And she just continues to laugh and laugh, not stopping. I get spooked and J-sprint across the road and quickly run into my home. Lock all of the doors and windows and look out of my living room window. There was nothing but fog. I continued to sit there for a few minutes until I see the woman again, slowly walking out of the fog. She couldn't see me since I was looking in from between the blinds, and it was dark. She stands in the middle of the street she was on, no cars around, and looks around to her left and her right. It seemed like she was looking for me. All of a sudden, something that I didn't expect to happen at all happened. She broke down into tears. She fell to her knees and started to sob, as if she were extremely hurt or disappointed that she couldn't find me. She sat there on her knees and sobbed, constantly for 5 minutes. Afterwards, she calmed down. She just got up and left, still quietly whimpering as she walked down the street away. 3 weeks later, the same situation occurs. I'm walking along the same road, same weather, fog and all. The exact same thing as the last encounter with the woman happens again, except this time I stopped across the street, turned and looked back towards the fog. Soon enough, she walked out and stared at me from across the road. After about 2 minutes of us just looking at each other, she just turns around and walks back into the fog. I turn away and quickly go home. I look out the window again to see if she's there anymore, but she wasn't. I heard the same horrible sobbing a few seconds after, though, from within the fog. It spooked me, because the crying wasn't just a bit of emotional hurt. It sounded as if she were crying over something majorly painful in her life both times. Like a murdered husband, or if her house had burned to the ground. It sounded as if her life were ruined both times. It's been almost a year since both these occurred, and I haven't walked down the same road in the dark again for fear of seeing her. But the question still sits in the back of my head. Who was she? And why was she doing this? What was she crying over? This story may not be as drastic as some of the other ones on this sub, but I will post it anyway. About a few years ago, my parents had to go to a wedding. The wedding was on a farm, so they had some sort of equipment and products of the farm still lying about. That'll be relevant later on in the story. When we got there was only 2 kids, a girl and her brother. My younger sister, who was more than sociable, quickly made friends with the girl. As for me, I didn't plan the same as my sister. The ceremony happened normally. Wedding things had carried on, of course. The dancing part of the wedding came around, and I went to go find my sister. She didn't show up for the toast or anything like that, so I assumed that she was playing with her newfound friend. I searched around the main waiting area and didn't find her, so I went to the hay bales by the parking area. And not to my surprise, she was there, jumping around on the hay bales with her newfound friend and her brother. As being in my pre-teens, I was bored, so I decided to join them. Things were pretty normal at first, but things quickly took a turn for the wrong. It started off minor. The brother of the 2 gradually started challenging me in almost every little thing. Like, "Oh, I bet you can't jump from the hay bale to that other one, or you won't jump from there, you'd hurt yourself." It was almost like he was testing me. His sentences that he spoke slowly moved away from challenges to how many people he had sent to the hospital and beat up. My sister, being a few years younger than me, was completely oblivious onto what he was doing. His threats soon escalated so much to where he threatened to beat me to death with a wrench. After hearing that, I told my sister that we needed to get the hell out of there, and we did, without them even noticing. Once we were back at the safety of the adults, I explained the situation to my parents and my sister. My parents, already a little tipsy, told me it was nothing to worry about. The brother didn't bother any of us until later, but his sister was just getting started. She started following my sister around like a dog, telling her, "It's okay if we're not friends. I just want to know what's going on." My sister repeatedly told her to go away, but she didn't listen. It was only until she walked up to her and said, "I want nothing to do with you or your brother, so leave us alone." Then she just left us alone. We had like an hour and a half before we encountered them again. We were just getting ready to leave when I ran into the brother and the sister. The sister was standing behind her brother while he was holding a knife ready to strike. He held it up, and before he could lay the hit down, I ran. Faster than I had ever ran before. I ran back to my parents, and luckily, for my safety, we were leaving. I made sure no one followed us home that night. The thing is, if he became a serial killer, I would never know because I never did catch his name. The kid who almost cut my life short at a wedding. Let's not meet again.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.